Hey everyone, I'm your host, Emily Lauren. Welcome to the Body Positive Podcast, where we ditch diets, normalize real bodies, and help you feel better in your own skin.
Welcome everyone to the Body Positive Podcast Show. Today we have Barb Puzanovova on the show. Barb is known as the non-diet trainer because she is a personal trainer that is both weight neutral and inclusive. Thanks so much for being on the show today.
Hi, Emily. Thanks for having me on. I am so excited to see where our conversation takes us today.
Me too. So let's start off by talking about your own personal experience with your body image and what inspired you to get into fitness.
That's always a great question. I'll just kind of take it back to college. I'll take it back, not too far, but I got into, I would say, a prestigious school, like your classic kids that all got A's and suddenly they're all thrown into this fishbowl and it's very stressful. And you're like, oh, I'm no longer the smartest fish in town. And so you have a whole bunch of overachievers, perfectionists, etc., taking all these classes. And I mentioned that because I feel like that was a contributing factor to basically my eating disorder back kind of around like freshman year, sophomore year. The guy that I was dating at the time taught me how to count macros as well. So, pros and cons to that relationship, but that was definitely something that also contributed for me to what I would now know as orthorexia, where you're just really concerned about the cleanliness or the health or, the macro and micronutrients of your food. I remember being super anxious about going out to eat or avoiding social gatherings. So my freshman year is pretty freaking lonely. And I talk about that pretty briefly. And I've, been in recovery for probably over 5 years for sure.
Amazing.
If I can do the math. So that got me though into the gym quite a bit. I don't think I was a very athletic kid. I was the one who was like picking dandelions on the field. I was not super athletic or sporty. I enjoyed movement for sure. My parents always took us what I call now dirt church, on Sundays we'd go hiking or kayaking, or we would be outside a lot as kids. But it wasn't until maybe like high school or so that I even started going to the gym. And I really started going to the gym for Zumba. Let's be clear about that. I love Zumba. I thought it was so fun. The instructors were really sweet. And so for me, as disordered as my eating was, movement for the most part was a pretty good, at the time, coping mechanism. I always like to say is not at all, my only coping mechanism now. I think for me back then, Barb 5 years ago, it was like a big thing.
Yeah.
So I think throughout college, it was just a reckoning of understanding what is my relationship with food, what's my relationship with my body, and what's my relationship with movement. And basically everything I did throughout college was directing me to basically where I am now as the non-diet trainer. And so it's been quite a path.
I bet. So why do you think it's so important to really include movement in recovery, or your recovery specifically? Is it good for both the physical, but more the mental aspects of things?
So for me, yes. And I say for me because I think for a lot of people, it's not necessarily true that it was only the food part. The movement part is like totally cool, butterflies and rainbows and sunshine. I think for a lot of us, those two things are connected because we tend to define health or the pursuit of health as diet and exercise. They go hand in hand so much. And unfortunately, that's continued to be reinforced by medical professionals. I like to feel that they're, doing the best of their intentions, like it's fine, but also it causes a lot of harm down the road. So for me, yes, movement was a way for me to really experience the range and breadth of my feelings, which is a big thing in recovery, is understanding how, our eating disorder is kind of just the surface level of things. Like I control my food. I try to control my body in times of stress. Again, going back to the like being a perfectionist in an overachiever school, that was super helpful for me at the time. I didn't understand why I was doing it. I didn't understand why I was researching the menus beforehand to see exactly what I was going to eat a week ahead of time on my campus. I didn't know where that was coming from, but looking back at it, it was just a way for me to try to figure out a way to cope with stress and to cope with the fact that I can't control everything and that I didn't understand like why now I'm turning that against my body, but that's what I was doing at the time. And so movement was a way for me to just be able to be by myself. I'm an introvert. So I was kind of like, it centered me, allowed me to really process my day. There was like a social component. I was able to like meet with friends and like do something together that was movement related, which was nice. But I wouldn't say that that's the case for everyone. For a lot of folks in recovery, stepping away from movement is the best thing you can do for your health.
Yeah, exercise can be triggering for some people, and there are different types of eating disorders that can play into, where you actually compulsively exercise to look a certain way and things like that. So that's really important to note, that everyone's journey is a little bit different. So how you were talking before about, exercise is predominantly associated with things like weight loss. How do we separate fitness from what it's so often associated with?
I would say the first thing is just being introduced to the idea that movement can be for something other than weight loss. And just like a side note, you may notice that I say movement more than I say exercise or working out or fitness. Not that those words are bad. I have just noticed with myself, a lot of other folks, that working out and fitness and exercising has this connotation that it has to be intense, that it has to look a certain way. There's music bumping, you have to be super motivated and like, ready to rock always at like 100% intensity. So I like to say movement because it tends to be like encompassing of things. I'm looking out at my yard right now. So like encompassing of things like gardening or swimming or playing with your kids, like things that we do in regular day-to-day life. That is movement. It absolutely is quote unquote exercise. We just usually don't consider it that way. And so that brings me back to your question around like, well, how do we start to tear it away a little bit from weight loss? I really like the verbiage of intuitive eating, putting weight loss on the back burner. So if you're cooking, the back burner is where you just let things simmer. They're not in your direct attention. They may still be there, but we get to let other things come to the front burner to our direct attention instead. And so that can be a really good first step to maybe put some other things on the front burner. So you may still engage in movement or exercise and still be kind of in the back of your head, like, I wonder if this is going to help me lose weight, or, have those little thoughts that kind of, do their thing back there. They're simmering, but maybe allowing other things to come to the forefront.
I really like that perspective.
Yeah, it's going to be different for everyone, but generally, like for me, you mentioned mental health. That's a big one. I definitely noticed that over the past year of, staying at home, like getting outside for a walk and like stretching. That's pretty much all I did.
That's all we could do, right?
Go outside, stretch. I bought some kettlebells. I like sometimes touched those, but for the most part, even as a fitness instructor, I was like, yeah, that's it. So mental health is a big one. Pain as well. I am in a straight size body as a thin person, but I still have pain. I still have creaky knees and hips that get achy and a low back that gets achy after I sit for a while. So understanding how it can help like decrease some pain and help things move a little bit smoother. And also sleep. I feel like sleep is super helpful for me. I feel like I sleep a little bit better and a little bit deeper if I've moved my body. But there's so many other reasons. So I would recommend folks try to put something else on the front burner and see how that feels.
I like that. And I especially like how you were talking about using the word movement to describe, what we normally think of as fitness or exercise, because I think it's really important, because so often we think we have to be do these intense things that hurt our body to feel the effects. And it could be simple as simple movements where you're just moving your body. I love that perspective. For a lot of people, when they're experiencing stress and anxiety, like we all have these past couple years, they can feel really unmotivated to move their bodies. I know, like for me, sometimes when I get stuck in like that crippling anxiety, I just want to like sit and do nothing. How can we get people to feel motivated to move their bodies in a way that works best for them, where they don't feel like they're being forced, but at the same time, they're honoring the fact that they need to move their bodies to feel better?
So I feel like there's almost like a twofold answer in there. So you mentioned about exercise being this thing that hurts. And I think that's like, if I break down human psychology real quickly, it's we want to avoid things that hurt and go towards things that give us more pleasure. So obviously, if I have this connection in my head that exercise hurts, is painful, or I don't feel seen or safe or respected in a fitness space or by a fitness instructor, I'm not going to be motivated to go. I'm just not, unless I have this motivation of wanting to lose weight. And then when we take that away, then what? Like the motivation is like, oh, nowhere to be found. And so that kind of leads into the other part where, okay, well, if that's not going to motivate me, what will? And so bring it back to basic psychology, bring back some pleasure into it. See if you can bring something that's more joyful into it, because then your brain will be like, oh, movement, that's the thing that feels good. Even if I'm not super excited about it right now, let me just try it and see how I feel afterwards. So even trying something for 5 minutes, like just put on a timer, go outside, move around a little bit, wiggle. I call it the wiggles. I just like like shoulder rolls and kind of, you know, maybe if you're a dancer, I'm not saying a good one, but I'm saying you like to groove, maybe you put on a song for a little bit and then see if your mood or energy level changes. And that can be a really nice way to just kind of like start kind of getting into it.
That's great
but the
advice.
word motivation is kind of funny because I think we all expect, I don't know. I feel like that's a great question to just ask ourselves of like, what do I expect of this feeling of motivation? I don't feel motivated to go on, even on a walk all the time. I'm like, like I'd rather chill here on the couch. Like it's very comfortable. It is very hot outside. I'm not saying go outside in the Tennessee summer heat at 3 p.m. I'm not saying that. But of course, I'm not going to be motivated to do that. But I think that the more that you engage and try to have that curiosity around what movement at least feels good afterwards, that doesn't leave me feeling drained, depleted, you know, disrespected or in pain, maybe that's a really great place to start. And your brain will continue to be like, oh yeah, remember how we felt after? Let's try that.
I love that. I love that. So with your services, you also bring the background of being an intuitive eating counselor. How does this impact your programs?
So I feel like the biggest way it impacts my programs, first off, I don't do any like meal planning or nutrition coaching. I leave that to the registered dietitians that have gone to school for years, done their internship, just done the whole shebang. I trust them so much. And it helps that they're intuitive eating and like health at every size aligned. But as far as my stuff, it really goes into understanding that health is larger than just diet and exercise. Yes. That health is much larger than how many vegetables you eat or, you know, how much protein and fat and whatever carbs you eat every day. You're much more than a number. And health can include things like feeling satisfied or feeling, you know, like I think about barbecues that we might have had in these past like few days or so, like the general enjoyment and satisfaction of like getting a really good burger with some like nice melted cheese on it. That's fantastic. And I also have that like communal aspect of sharing, like really breaking bread. You know, can't do that on the keto diet. There's no bread. Breaking bread with people that I love, you know, like especially since we're all vaccinated. I'm like, this is amazing. This is what I've wanted for the past, you know, year and a half. This is like we get to live and eat and celebrate together again. So it's really just taking a wider lens a wider look at our own health, and also understanding that it's not just an individual's health that we're looking at, we're also trying to address other like social justice pieces into it, because if we have communities that are not healthy or are not getting supported or are generally marginalized, it's really hard to then also be like, yeah, are you eating your vegetables?
So true.
There's an anti-trans bill that's endangering your life, but also, are you getting enough protein, honey?
Right?
Like, that just feels really out of touch. And so I want to always bring that in. There's always more to learn for sure, because there's so many human experiences that we just don't personally know. But thankfully we can listen to each other and incorporate that into our work as well.
Absolutely. And you primarily work with women as well as trans, non-binary, and queer people. How do you promote the acceptance of all bodies? And what do you do differently with your clients than someone who only works with, say, size, gender people?
That's a great question. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because I know in my like email with you, maybe I was like, I don't technically promote myself as like, oh, I only work with people that identify as like not cis men.
Yes.
But technically kind of what happens over time. But I feel like my approach is just seeing people as a human person. Like if somebody has had top surgery, I may not know that experience directly by myself, but there's resources out there. There's incredible educators and activists, and you know, like there's ways for me to understand how to work with someone on a personal level, rather than being like, oh, this is like too complicated and just getting like frustrated by it, or you know, and that goes with people with like different health conditions or different levels of experience with movement. I think sometimes people are like, oh, like this person just, it's too hard, you know, to figure it out. I'm like, but that's my job.
Yes.
As a coach, it's my job to figure it out. Or if I can't figure it out, to have a network of resources so that I can then refer people to somebody who does know their experience much better. Like, it's really important for me to have a network of other like queer folks that I can be like, hey, they will actually know how to like connect with you on that level if that's what you're looking for, much better than I can. And that's okay. Like, I also don't need to serve everybody under the sun and think like, oh yeah, I'm going to do an amazing job with, you know, 100% of every person that I've ever met. So that's my biggest thing, referring out when I don't know, educating myself if that's within my scope, for sure.
I love that. And I think it's so simple for us to do things, you know, whether it's just using inclusive language or making sure we're using the right pronouns to make everyone feel comfortable in any environment, not just, you know, personal training and things like that. What is the best way to find someone to work with that's as inclusive as you are? Like, I think it's really tricky these days because a lot of wellness culture can be disguised as diet culture, and you know, they're not as open and accepting of others. And
yeah. So a couple of resources come to mind. Ilya Parker has, at Decolonizing Fitness, has a really good, I guess I would call it like a fitness finder. So you can connect with other fitness professionals that identify as queer or LGBTQ plus. And also the Super Fit Hero finder. I think the Body Positive Fitness Finder is still in existence. So connecting with some folks there, that has been an awesome resource in years past for other folks. But just in general, I am a huge fan of social media.
Oh,
like
yeah.
It's a really nice way to casually kind of check in on, you know, the values of somebody that I may possibly work with if I'm hiring a coach. So I can imagine that people are doing that as well, where you can just follow somebody for like a few months, or I'll have people who've been like, oh, I followed you for like a few years, and like now I get to meet you, you know, or now I want to work with you because I've seen how consistent you are with X, Y, and Z, and that's really awesome. Or you can decide you're like, oh, actually you're not like totally in line with whatever, and then there you can follow somebody else and like figure out their stuff, because I feel like ultimately you want to work with someone that you trust, someone that you feel like you can be honest with, that you know, you can be safe with, and at least, you know, and for me, like safety is more in the sense of like, not that things won't go wrong, or there's not going to be conflict, or there's not going to be a moment. I remember right now I'm thinking if I got somebody's pronouns wrong, or I, just kind of like used a pronoun that they no longer use at this point. And I was like, oh, and you just get to like quickly, they just right away were like, hey, actually it's this, can you use this going forward? And I was like, oh, okay, yes. Instead of making a huge deal of it, where you're like, oh gosh, I didn't know, and self-flagellating. It's like, it's fine, just move forward.
We're learning, we're making the world better by fixing those errors, and instead of avoiding them entirely, right?
Yeah, because you're gonna mess up. And I think that's the scariest thing sometimes for people. I'm an Enneagram 1, and I'm just like, I don't want to mess up ever. I don't want it. But I think that's just understanding that you're going to mess up. Like as a coach, sometimes I program things that are too easy or too hard, and we get to work together as a team instead of being like, well, oh no, like I made a mistake, and but it's actually your fault, or I don't know. We get to figure that out together and be like, oh, like that was, not the right thing for you. Let's change that. Or let's I'm going to admit that I fucked up here, and let's change that.
Exactly. I think that's really, really cool. Tell us how people can learn about your services and where we can find you online.
So social media, I will start with that. You can find me on Instagram at non-diet_trainer. And then as far as website, thenondiettrainer.com. And you can also email me at thenondiettrainer@gmail.com.
Amazing. And lastly, if you could offer one tip to our listeners, what would that be?
Follow your joy.
I love that. That is a fantastic sentence for us to all live by. So thank you so much, Barb, for taking some time to talk with us today on the show. And I can't wait for everyone to listen to this and check you out.
Thanks so much, Emily.
Once again, thanks for listening to today's episode. Make sure you follow us at Real Happy Daughter, and please share this with someone who needs a little more real in their life.